Good evening. I hope you're comfortable. If you're not, now would be a good time to adjust your pillow or pull your blanket up a little higher. There's no rush. I'll wait. Okay. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about time. Not in a scientific way. I'm not qualified for that. But in the way that you might think about it when you're lying in bed and you can't quite fall asleep. Or when you're driving on a long stretch of country road and the radio's playing something soft and you're not thinking about anything in particular, but you are also thinking about everything at once. Time is something we all have, but none of us can hold. Which seems unfair when you think about it. We can hold a lot of things: groceries, a warm mug of coffee, the hand of someone we love, but not time. Time just goes. I noticed this the other day when I was looking at my watch. It was 3:47 in the afternoon. I teach choir at the middle school, and I was waiting for the kids to finish their scales. Specifically, I was waiting for Connor Feldman to finish his scales. Because Connor always takes a little longer, not because he's bad at it, but because he's very thoughtful about each note. He wants to get it right. I respect that about Connor. Anyway, I looked at my watch and it said 3:47, and I thought, that's a specific moment. And then I looked again, and it was 3:48. And that other moment, 3:47, was gone. Just gone. I'll never get another 3:47 on that particular day, October 14th, while Connor Feldman finishes his scales. That moment existed, and now it's in the past. This bothered me more than I expected. So tonight, while you fall asleep, I thought we could think about time together. Where it goes, why it feels fast sometimes, and slow other times. What we're supposed to do with it. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll understand it a little better. Or at least feel okay about not understanding it. Let's start with something small. When I was young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, my grandmother had a clock in her kitchen that ran 5 minutes fast. She did this on purpose. She said it helped her get to church on time, even though she knew the clock was fast, which meant she knew she wasn't actually running late, which meant the whole system didn't make sense. But she kept it that way anyway. I asked her once, "Grandma, why don't you just leave the clock on the right time and leave 5 minutes earlier?" She looked at me for a long time. She had a way of looking at you where you felt like she was reading a book that was written on your face. And then she said, "Joseph, some things don't need to make sense. They just need to work." I think about that a lot. That clock stayed 5 minutes fast until she died. And then my aunt inherited the house, and the first thing she did was set the clock to the correct time. It felt like a betrayal, even though it was technically more accurate. Sometimes, accuracy isn't the point. Time is funny that way. It's exact. Down to the millisecond, down to the nanosecond if you're an atomic clock in Colorado. But the way we experience it isn't exact at all. An hour in the waiting room at the DMV feels like 3 hours. An hour with someone you love feels like 10 minutes. Same amount of time. Completely different. Einstein talked about this. He said if you sit on a hot stove for a minute, it feels like an hour, but if you sit with a pretty girl for an hour, it feels like a minute. That's relativity. I think Einstein was a genius, but I also think he could have used a more comfortable example than a hot stove. The point is, time bends. Not physically. Well, maybe physically. I'm not a physicist. But in our minds, time is elastic. And I think that's because time isn't really about clocks or calendars. It's about what fills it. There's a diner in town called the Lucky Penny. I go there most Sundays after church for breakfast. I always order the same thing. 2 eggs over easy, rye toast, and a coffee. The waitress, Linda, doesn't even ask anymore. She just brings it. Linda's worked there for 32 years. I know this because there was a little party for her last month. and they put up a banner that said 32 years of service, with balloons that were starting to deflate by the time I got there for breakfast the next Sunday. One balloon had fallen completely and was just lying on the floor behind the register like it had given up. I thought about Linda, working at the Lucky Penny for 32 years. That's 11,680 days, if my math is right. Probably more if you count leap years. That's 11,680 times of waking up and going to the same place, and pouring coffee and taking orders, and wiping down tables. Some people might think that sounds boring. But I watched Linda work, and she doesn't look bored. She looks like she's exactly where she's supposed to be. She remembers how people take their coffee. She knows when someone's having a bad day just by how they sit down in the booth. She's not just serving breakfast. She's participating in people's lives in these small but important ways every single day, and I thought, that's time well spent. Not because it's exciting or because it's going to end up in a history book, but because it's steady, it's reliable, it's kind. We don't talk enough about steady time. We talk about making the most of your time, and time is money, and don't waste time. All these phrases that make it sound like time is something you're supposed to win at. But what if time isn't a competition? What if it's just there, a thing to move through like water, and the point is to notice what you're swimming past? Linda's been swimming past the Lucky Penny for 32 years, and I bet she's noticed a lot. The way the light comes through the window at 8 a.m. in June, the sound of the coffee machine struggling every morning until someone jiggles the filter, the regular who always leaves a $1 tip no matter what he orders, even if it's just a coffee, which means he's leaving a 400% tip, which is either very generous or means he doesn't understand percentages. These are small things, but small things are what time is made of. Let me tell you about my neighbor, Jean. Jean is 76 years old, and every single day, weather permitting, he goes for a walk at 4:30 in the afternoon. He walks the same route, down Oak Street, left on Maple, around the park, back up Pine, and home. Takes him exactly 45 minutes. I know because I've timed it, not in a creepy way, just in an observational way. I asked Jean once why he walks the same route every day, and he said, if I walked a different route, I might miss something. I said, but Jean, you walk the same route. You see the same things? He said, exactly. I didn't understand what he meant at first, but I've been thinking about it for 2 years now, and I think I'm starting to get it. Jean isn't walking the same route to see the same things. He's walking the same route to see how those things change. The tree on the corner of Maple that blooms pink in April and loses its leaves by November. The house with the blue shutters where a young couple moved in last spring, and you can tell they're fixing it up, because every few weeks there's a new improvement. New mailbox, new porch light, now they've painted the door red. The spot by the park where there used to be a bench, and now there's just a square of dirt, and if you didn't walk past it regularly, you'd never know a bench used to be there at all. Jean is watching time happen in real time, if that makes sense. He's a witness to it. I think that's important. To witness time, not just live through it, but actually pay attention to it as it goes by. Most of us are too busy. I'm too busy sometimes. I get caught up in grading papers and planning lessons and making sure I have enough milk for the week, and suddenly it's Thursday, and I don't remember what happened to Monday. Time slipped past me while I wasn't looking, but Jean won't let that happen. Jean is vigilant. Every day, 4:30, 45 minutes, same route. He's saying, I'm here. I'm paying attention. Time. I see you. I admire that. When I was 12, my dad took me fishing. We went to Lake Michigan, out on a boat with his friend Carl, who had one of those fishing boats with the little cabin where you can sit if it rains, though it didn't rain that day. It was August, and it was hot, and the sun was reflecting off the water in a way that made you squint even with sunglasses on. We fished for hours. I don't remember if we caught anything, probably not. I wasn't very good at fishing, and I'm still not. But I remember sitting in that boat with my dad and Carl, not really talking much, just the sound of the water and the occasional seagull, and feeling like time had stopped, not in a bad way, in a peaceful way, like we'd found a little pocket where time didn't exist, or at least didn't matter. We weren't late for anything. We weren't rushing to get anywhere. We were just there, on the water, waiting for fish that may or may not come. My dad died when I was 19. Heart attack. Very sudden. One day he was there, and the next day he wasn't. And that's how time works sometimes. It doesn't give you a warning. It doesn't let you prepare. I think about that day on the boat a lot. I wish I'd known it was going to be important. I wish I'd paid more attention. But I was 12, and when you're 12, you think you have infinite time with the people you love. You think there will always be another fishing trip, another Saturday morning, another chance to say the things you want to say. But time doesn't work that way. I don't want to make you sad. That's not the point of tonight. The point is, and I'm still figuring this out myself, the point is that we can't know which moments are going to be important. So maybe all of them are. Maybe every fishing trip, every walk around the block, every breakfast at the Lucky Penny, every 3:47 p.m., while Connor Feldman finishes his scales. Maybe all of it matters. Maybe attention is the only thing we can really give to time, the only way to hold it, even though we can't actually hold it. There's a documentary I watched once about trees, old growth trees, specifically, trees that have been alive for hundreds of years. There was one tree, I think it was a Douglas fir in Oregon, that was over 700 years old. 700 years, that tree was alive during the Renaissance. It was alive when the printing press was invented. It was alive through every war, every technological advancement, every human triumph and tragedy of the last 7 centuries. And it just stood there, growing, slowly. Trees experience time differently than we do. A year for us feels significant. For a tree, a year is just another ring. They measure time in rings. You probably knew that. And scientists can look at those rings and tell you what the weather was like in any given year, if there was a drought or if it was a particularly good year for growth. The tree keeps a record of time inside itself. I think humans do this too in a way. Not with rings, obviously, but with memories. Every experience adds a layer. Every year adds complexity. You can't see it from the outside, but it's there. We're all walking records of the time we've lived through. Sometimes I think about what my rings would show. There'd be thin rings for the hard years. The year my dad died, that would be a thin ring. The year I had pneumonia and missed a month of school, thin ring. But there'd be thick rings too. The year I got my teaching job, the year I learned how to make a really good pot roast. The year I finally figured out how to talk to people at parties without feeling like I was doing it wrong. Not every year is equal. Some years are full and some years are narrow, and that's okay. That's just how growth works. The thing about old trees is they're still growing. Even at 700 years old, they're still adding rings. Still reaching toward the sun. Still doing their tree business. They don't stop just because they're old. They keep going until they can't anymore. I find that encouraging. Let's talk about clocks for a minute. I have 7 clocks in my house. I didn't mean to collect 7 clocks. It just happened. There's the one in the kitchen. That's a digital one. The numbers glow blue. There's the one in the bedroom, which is also digital, but it glows red, which I've read is supposed to be better for your sleep, but I haven't noticed a difference. There's the one in the living room, which is analog, which means it has hands that go around in a circle, which feels more honest somehow. Like you can see time moving, instead of just numbers changing. Then there's the clock on the microwave, the clock on the stove, the clock on my wristwatch, and the clock on my phone. 7 clocks, and they're all slightly different. The one in the kitchen is 1 minute ahead. The one on the stove is 2 minutes behind. My wristwatch is exactly right because I set it to the atomic clock website, which I realize is a little obsessive. But if you're going to know what time it is, you might as well really know. Despite having 7 clocks, I'm often late. Not very late, usually just a few minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 7. The kind of late where you apologize, but it's not a big deal. I think this is because clocks don't actually tell you about time. They tell you about a system we all agreed on, so that we could coordinate our lives. Let's meet at 7 p.m. School starts at 8 a.m. The movie begins at 6:45. These are useful agreements. But they're not time itself. Time itself is the thing underneath the numbers. It's the actual experience of duration, of change, of one moment becoming the next moment, which becomes the next moment, which keeps going until it stops, which it will, for all of us, eventually. Sorry, that got dark, but it's true. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that. Time is limited, for humans anyway. We get a certain amount, nobody knows how much, and then we don't get any more. This could be terrifying, and sometimes it is. Late at night when you can't sleep, and you start thinking about mortality, and the vastness of the universe, and how small you are in comparison, it can feel very terrifying. But it can also be clarifying. If time is limited, then it's valuable. And if it's valuable, then how we spend it matters. Not in a stressful optimize every second kind of way, but in a gentle pay attention to what you're doing and who you're with kind of way. Like right now, you're spending time listening to me talk about time. That's your choice. You could be doing anything else. Watching television, reading a book, scrolling on your phone, organizing your sock drawer. But instead, you're here. And I'm here. And we're in this moment together, even though I'm probably not actually with you. I'm probably recording this, or you're reading it, or however this is happening. But still, we're connected by this shared duration. Thank you for that. I don't take it for granted. In the winter, time feels slower. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but it's true for me. Maybe it's because the days are shorter, so you're more aware of them. Maybe it's because everything is cold and still, and there's less to do. You can't garden. You can't go for pleasant walks unless you really bundle up. You mostly just stay inside and wait for spring. I don't mind winter though. I know a lot of people complain about it, especially here in the Midwest where winter is long and serious and doesn't end when you want it to. But I think winter is when you can really feel time. In the summer, everything is busy and fast and bright. Time rushes by in a blur of green leaves and outdoor concerts and staying up late because it's still light out at 9 o'clock. You blink and summer's over and you can't remember what you did with it. But winter makes you slow down. Winter makes you sit in your living room with a blanket and a book and actually read the book instead of skimming it. Winter makes you notice the small changes. The way the sun sets a minute later each day after the solstice. The first crocus pushing up through the snow in March. The morning you wake up and it's light outside and you realize winter is finally losing its grip. This past winter, I started doing something new. Every evening, right before bed, I would stand by my kitchen window and look outside for exactly 5 minutes. I set a timer. 5 minutes. Just looking. At first, it felt awkward. 5 minutes is longer than you think when you're just standing there. You start to get self-conscious. You think, what am I doing? This is weird. I should be doing something productive. But after a few days, I started to notice things. The way the streetlight casts shadows on the snow. The tracks from the neighbor's cat who cuts through my yard every night. The sound of the house settling. Little creaks and groans that you don't hear when you're busy. The feeling of my own breath, in and out. which is another way of measuring time if you think about it. We breathe about 20,000 times a day. Every breath is a little clock tick. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. That's time passing right there in your lungs. By February, I looked forward to my 5 minutes. It became a ritual, a way of marking the end of the day, a way of saying, I'm here, I'm present, I'm witnessing time. I still do it, even though it's not winter anymore. Some habits are worth keeping. Let me tell you about my Aunt Karen. Aunt Karen is my dad's sister, and she's one of those people who's always in a hurry. Not in a stressed-out way, in an energetic way. She talks fast, walks fast, eats fast. She's always got somewhere to be, and something to do. When I was younger, this intimidated me. I'm naturally slow. I talk slow. I walk slow, I think slow. I worried that Aunt Karen thought I was boring. But last Christmas, we were both at my cousin's house, and it was late, maybe 10 p.m., and everyone else had gone to bed or gone home. And it was just me and Aunt Karen sitting in the living room with the Christmas tree lights still on. We weren't really talking about anything important, just chatting. And then Aunt Karen said, out of nowhere, Joseph, do you ever feel like you're running out of time? I said, yeah. Sometimes. She said, I feel like that every day. I wake up and think, what am I going to do with today? And then the day happens, and it's never enough. I always think I'm going to do more than I actually do. Read more, call more people, finally clean out the garage. But I don't. And then it's nighttime, and the day's over, and I think, where did it go? I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She said, your dad wasn't like that. He was slow, like you. He'd spend an hour just sitting on the porch doing nothing. Used to drive me crazy. I'd say, don't you have something to do? And he'd say, I am doing something. I'm sitting. Like that was an activity. She laughed, but it was a sad laugh. She said, I wish I'd learned that from him. How to just sit. We sat there for a while after that, not talking, just sitting in the living room with the Christmas tree lights blinking on and off in their slow, rhythmic way. It was nice. I think Aunt Karen is afraid of time in a way that I'm not, or at least in a way that I'm not anymore. She's afraid it's going to run out before she does everything she wants to do. And maybe it will. Maybe it does for everyone. But I think my dad understood something that I'm only now starting to understand, which is that you can't do everything. You can only do what you do, and if you spend all your time worrying about the things you're not doing, you miss the things you are doing. Like sitting on the porch, like sitting in a living room with your nephew at Christmas, like standing by your kitchen window for 5 minutes every night, watching the snow. These aren't productive activities. They don't accomplish anything. But maybe that's the point. Maybe not everything has to accomplish something. Maybe some things just get to exist. There's a philosopher named Heidegger. I'm probably saying his name wrong, I apologize, who wrote about something called being toward death. It sounds grim, but it's actually not, or at least it doesn't have to be. The idea is that humans are the only creatures who know we're going to die. A squirrel doesn't know it's going to die. A squirrel just does squirrel things. Gathers nuts, climbs trees, avoids cars, without thinking about the fact that one day it won't be a squirrel anymore. It'll be a dead squirrel, and then eventually it'll be nothing at all, just nutrients returning to the earth. But humans know. We know we're temporary. And Heidegger said this knowledge, this awareness of our own mortality, is what gives life meaning. Because if we lived forever, nothing would matter. There'd be no reason to choose one thing over another. You could always do it later. Later would be infinite. But later isn't infinite. Later eventually runs out. And because it runs out, our choices matter. How we spend our time matters. I think about this when I'm at the grocery store trying to decide between two kinds of cereal. Rationally, I know it doesn't matter. They're both cereal. One has slightly more fiber, one has slightly more sugar. In the grand scheme of the universe, this choice is meaningless. But in the small scheme of my life, it matters a little bit. Because I only get so many breakfasts. Maybe 30,000 if I'm lucky. Maybe less. And each one is a chance to start the day in a certain way. With fiber, or with sugar, or with nothing if I skip breakfast, which I try not to do because breakfast is important. This might sound like I'm overthinking cereal. I probably am. But I think small choices are where time lives. Not in the big dramatic moments. Those are rare. But in the accumulation of ordinary decisions that make up a life. Do I take the long way home or the short way? Do I call my friend or do I text? Do I stay up late watching television or do I go to bed early and read? Do I stop and watch the sunset or do I keep walking? Every choice is a little branch in the path, and you can't go back and take the other branch. You can only keep going forward with the branch you chose. I find this both sad and beautiful. Sad because there are so many branches I'll never take, so many versions of my life I'll never live. Beautiful because the branch I did take is mine. It's specific. It's particular. It's the one life I get, made up of all the small choices I made, added up over time. Let's talk about seasons for a minute. Because seasons are how we organize time when we're not looking at clocks. There are 4 seasons, traditionally. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Though if you live in the Midwest like I do, there are really 5 seasons. Spring, summer, fall, winter, and second winter, which happens in March when you think winter is over, but then it snows again, and you have to get your boots back out of the closet. I've lived through 38 springs, 38 summers, 38 falls, 38 winters plus 38 second winters, so really 76 winters if you count them separately, which maybe you should. That's a lot of seasons. And yet, I can't remember most of them. They blur together. Springs blend into other springs. Summers blend into other summers. I can remember specific moments. The spring when I planted tomatoes for the first time. The summer I learned to swim. The fall my dad died. The winter I got the flu and had to stay in bed for a week. But the seasons themselves, they're just a general feeling. Spring feels like hope. Summer feels like possibility. Fall feels like change. Winter feels like rest, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe rest feels like winter, and winter feels like a long, quiet pause in the year where everything gets to stop for a while. I read somewhere that trees don't actually sleep in winter. They go dormant, but they're still alive. Still doing tree things, just very slowly. Their sap thickens. Their metabolism slows down. They're conserving energy, waiting for spring, when they'll wake up and start growing again. I think humans could learn from this. We're not very good at dormancy. We think we should be productive all the time, growing, achieving, improving. We feel guilty when we're not doing something, but maybe dormancy is part of the cycle. Maybe you're supposed to have periods where you slow down and thicken your sap, and just wait. Not forever. Just for a season. And then spring comes, and you start again. I want to tell you about something that happened last Tuesday. I was driving to work, and I stopped at a red light at the intersection of Oak and 5th. I've stopped at this light hundreds, maybe thousands of times. It's not a notable intersection. There's a gas station on one corner, a tax preparation office on another corner, a empty lot on the third corner where there used to be a hardware store, but it closed down 3 years ago. The light turned green, and I started to drive, and then I saw a bird. It was just a regular bird. A robin, I think. It was standing in the middle of the crosswalk, pecking at something on the ground. The light was green, and there were cars behind me, and I should have gone. But I didn't. I just sat there, waiting for the bird to finish whatever it was doing. The car behind me honked. The bird looked up. It wasn't scared, exactly. It just looked at me, the way birds do, with that quick, jerky head movement, and then it flew away. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds. 10 seconds if you count the honking. I drove away and finished my commute, and taught my classes and graded papers, and did all the normal things you do on a Tuesday. But I kept thinking about that bird. Not because it was special. It wasn't. It was just a bird, doing bird things. But I stopped for it. I saw it, and I waited, and I gave it the time it needed to do what it was doing, and that felt like something. I don't know what, but something. Time is invisible, which makes it hard to think about. You can't see time. You can see the effects of time. Rust on metal, wrinkles on skin, the way a river erodes rock over millions of years. But you can't see time itself. You can't touch it or taste it or smell it. You can hear it, sort of. A clock ticking, a bell chiming. But that's not really time. That's just sound. Time is what's happening underneath the sound. It's the space between the ticks, the pause between heartbeats, the moment between breathing in and breathing out. That's where time lives, in the gaps. I think about this when I'm teaching. I teach choir, like I mentioned, and there's this thing in music called a rest. It's a silence, a deliberate absence of sound. A lot of beginning musicians ignore rests. They think the music is just the notes, the sounds you make. They rush through the rests because they think silence doesn't matter. But silence matters. Silence is part of the music. Without rests, without pauses, music would just be noise. The same is true for time, I think. We focus so much on the things we do, the activities, the accomplishments, the busyness, but we forget about the pauses, the moments in between, the time when nothing is happening, but that's when something important is happening. That's when you catch your breath. That's when you notice the bird in the crosswalk. That's when you stand by your kitchen window and watch the snow. That's when you're just alive, without trying to be anything else. My grandmother, the one with the fast clock, used to say, "The days are long, but the years are short." I didn't understand this when I was young. Days felt short to me. Years felt endless. But now I'm 38, and I understand exactly what she meant. A single day can feel very long, especially a hard day. A day when you're waiting for test results, or sitting with someone who's sick, or just enduring something difficult. Those days stretch out. Time moves like honey. Each hour is thick and slow, but years vanish. I'll think, that was 3 years ago, and then I'll realize it was actually 7 years ago. Or 10 years ago, and somehow an entire decade slipped past me while I was busy doing other things. This is why people always say, time flies, because it does from a distance. When you zoom out and look at your whole life, time moves incredibly fast. But when you zoom in, when you're in the moment, paying attention, time slows down. This is the paradox. Time is both fast and slow, depending on where you're standing. I think the trick, if there is a trick, is to zoom in as much as possible. To be in the moment you're in, not the moment you just left, or the moment that's coming next. Right now, for example. Right now, you're here. Maybe you're in bed, or on a couch, or in a chair. Maybe it's dark outside, or maybe it's still light. Maybe you're alone, or maybe someone's sleeping next to you. Whatever the case, this is your right now, this specific moment, and it will never come again. Tomorrow, you'll have a different right now. And the day after that, another one. And they'll all be slightly different. and they'll all be unrepeatable. Doesn't that seem important? Doesn't that seem like something worth noticing? I'm going to tell you one more story, and then I think we should probably let you fall asleep. Last spring, I planted a tree. I'm not a gardener. I can barely keep houseplants alive, but I decided I wanted to plant a tree. So I went to the nursery, and I asked them what kind of tree would be good for my yard, and they recommended a dogwood. Dogwoods are nice. They have white flowers in the spring and red berries in the fall, and they don't grow too big. The woman at the nursery said it would take about 5 years for it to really establish itself, and maybe 10 years before it looked like a proper tree, instead of just a tall stick with leaves. 5 to 10 years. I'm 38 years old. In 5 years, I'll be 43. In 10 years, I'll be 48. That seems very old, though I know it's not actually that old. My Aunt Karen is 62 and she's still in a hurry, so clearly life continues past 48. But still, 10 years, that's a long time to wait for a tree. I planted it anyway. I dug the hole, which was harder than I expected because the ground was full of rocks. I put the tree in the hole. I filled the hole back up with dirt. I watered it, and then I stood back and looked at it. It looked like a stick, a very small, vulnerable stick that might not survive, but I've been watering it. Every few days I go outside with the hose and I water my tree, and it's growing, slowly. You can't see it grow, obviously. It's not like time-lapse photography, but every few weeks I notice it's a little taller, a little fuller. It's doing its tree thing. And I realized, this tree is going to outlive me. If it survives, and I hope it does, this tree will be here long after I'm gone. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it'll still be in my yard, or whoever's yard it is by then. Growing, providing shade, turning carbon dioxide into oxygen, just being a tree, and that made me feel, I don't know, connected to something bigger than myself. I won't see this tree at its full size. I'll see it at 10 years, maybe 20 if I'm lucky, and I stay in this house, and the tree stays healthy. But other people will see it at 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. They'll sit under it, they'll have picnics in its shade, they'll watch birds build nests in its branches. And maybe they'll think, this is a nice tree. I wonder who planted it. And they won't know it was me. They won't know anything about me. But I'll have given them something anyway. This tree, this small contribution to the future, that's time too. Not just the time we experience, but the time we leave behind. The things we do that outlast us. I find that comforting. Okay. I think that's enough about time for tonight. Or maybe it's not enough. Maybe we could talk about time forever and still not understand it completely. But that's okay. Some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be experienced. So here's what I want you to do. If you're still awake, and it's okay if you're not, the whole point of this was to help you fall asleep. But if you're still awake, I want you to take a breath. A slow breath, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the air going in. Feel the air going out. That's time happening, right there. In your lungs, in your body. You're alive, right now, in this moment, and that's enough. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to accomplish anything or be productive or make the most of your time. You just have to be here, and you are. You're here. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know you could have spent it doing something else, but you spent it listening to me talk about time, and clocks, and birds, and trees, and all the other things I think about when I can't sleep. I hope you sleep well. I hope you dream, and I hope when you wake up tomorrow you notice something small. Something you might have missed if you weren't paying attention. the way the morning light comes through your window, the sound of birds waking up, the feeling of your feet on the floor. These are small things, but small things are what time is made of, and they're yours. This day, this moment, this breath, it's all yours. Good night. Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning. Or not see you. You know what I mean. Take care.